Hello and welcome to the That's So Craven podcast, your one-stop shop for all things Fulham. We are back after a disappointing game on the weekend against Aston Villa. We're going to try and cheer everyone up and talk about the upcoming Everton game as Fulham make their final ever appearance at Goodison Park. Here to discuss it all, we have Skibby in beautiful new surroundings. How are we going, Skibby?
I'm very well. As you can see, it's very white and bright, so it needs a bit of, maybe some black in here as well to go with the black and white. But no, I'm all good. Tired, but yeah, I don't know what was worse, having to sort of build about endless amounts of flat pack IKEA furniture or endure Fulham versus Aston Villa. So that was a really tough dilemma. But no, happy to be here. Happy to talk all things Fulham and happy to look forward to Everton, I suppose.
Yeah, we were slightly lucky that we didn't have to actually review that game. We left that down to Pod Daddy and Dave. Dad, how are we going
The
tonight?
adults.
Absolutely. Hey, have to say, enjoying the reverb of the new room, Skibby. I'm loving it. Yeah, good. Thanks, Jack. I'm feeling a bit sluggish, to be honest. My new fitness regime. I've actually taken the initiative and taken on a personal trainer with some interval training because I've heard that there could be a spot in the midfield. I'll probably need to get my beep test up to about 15. I'm quite a long way off that, but yeah. Could be a game for me on the weekend if I play my cards right, I reckon.
Yeah, look, you're a sprightly 63, so it's not out of the question. But yeah, look, it was. Let's, I guess, recap the game against Villa. It was a really just a disappointing game, and we'll shout out a stat we were just talking about before, where I believe it's the first time in Premier League history that a team has had a man sent off, missed a penalty, and scored an own goal in the same game. It just didn't go well. It was not a good time. No one played well, really. A few people tried hard, but didn't really make much of a difference. Dad, your final thoughts on Villa? I know we've forced you to review the game already, but give us a final wrap on how we feel after that Villa game.
The review was not a painful experience, to be honest. It's plenty of content, It's a lot to talk about because it was a wild, crazy game with really a lot happening, as you just summarised, but also just yeah, hard to comprehend how bad we did in the probably 3 or 4 key moments of the game. But I think in your intro there, a little bit unfair to Raul Jimenez. He actually had a pretty good game. And Bert Leno, despite the scoreline, actually did have a very good game. Couldn't keep the hook of Issa Diop out, and a pretty decent finish from Watkins. But other than that, he had a really good game. So look, difficult afternoon, pretty woeful display by a midfield, and I think outthunk by Unai Emery.
Yeah, Skibby. Fortunately, like me, we managed to miss most of it, and have had to. It's even more painful, sort of being forced to watch the game so that you can actually review it afterwards, even though you kind of don't want to. But how are we feeling after everything? There's a lot of questions sort of posed for us now.
I think, yeah, there's a point in this game, this season, where we've started really, really well. We came across Aston Villa, who are in the Champions League, probably have one of the best managers in the league, I would say tactically. And, they came off the back of beating Bayern Munich. So I don't think I think it just shows how far we've come that people are saying, oh, well, we didn't play very well against a team who is actually doing quite well in Europe as it goes. And I mean, in the league as well, I think they're only like 2 points off top. So,
Yeah,
I mean, they're a good side. And I think it even shows the kind of levels of where Aston Villa are in terms of where we want to be, but also this fact of, Guardiola, in my eyes, was quite stubborn, stuck to his guns, didn't really treat Fulham with too much respect in a way that Aston Villa did. So, when we played against Man City, he didn't really care that Adama Traore was playing against Rico Lewis, which is a massive mismatch, and, almost, got us a point from a game at the Etihad against one of the best teams in Europe, if not the world. But, Unai Emery to come in, and he really shut the door on Traore. He really made, and I think I saw, sort of reading Costa kind of analysis as well while watching some of the highlights, which is you could see is, they were forcing us down Bassi and to play it out and trying to shut the door on Anderson, and they really did it well. And I think there's one thing about Fulham not being up to the mark and not playing well, but I think in my eyes, from what I saw, Villa were just that good that we we got caught out, and it's going to happen, and that's how you learn. Now we can take this away, and if we suppress Anderson, then what do we do? If Adama's not having as much luck as he did from every other game this season, what do we do? And this is where we start to get the cogs turning, and I think it's a learning curve. It's how we grow, and for me, it needed to happen, and it was bound to happen. Okay, I don't want it to happen in a way that, a heavily deflected goal, a red card, missed penalty, and all these things, but it's still a learning curve, and it's one that we take and we move on to. So I think it's happened at the right time, and it's something that we can take going forward.
I think. Sorry, Jack. I think one other interesting point that has been discussed heavily is, Villa are very much where I think we'd like to be, as you say, Skibby, in now or soon. But what was very evident was when it wasn't working for us, if you looked at the dugout, there was very little there of high quality that we could rely on to change the game.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. You look at Villa's squad. I mean, you just have to look at John Duran on the bench for Villa, a man who is being kept out of the side fairly in a way by Ollie Watkins, and yet has scored more goals than him off the bench this season. It's not like Watkins isn't scoring either, and Duran scored during the week in the Champions League as well. So look, I think we do need to take a bit of a step back, really, and say that our last two games have been against Man City and Aston Villa. We've lost them both, but I don't think the Villa game wasn't a good performance, let's be honest. But I don't think we're disgracing ourselves in any way so far this season. And there's nothing to overly worry about at this stage. But I do feel like there's some things being made clear so far. Lukic being such an important player that maybe we didn't quite realise how important he was at the start of this season. Pereira maybe just not quite up to the standard that we've kind of expected over the last couple of seasons, and maybe being found out a little bit. Sander Berger maybe not quite up to speed yet. But look, we can cover all of that as we preview the Everton game. But before we do, just a reminder again to everyone listening in to please join the That's So Craven Discord. Really great community, great place where we've got great contributors constantly putting out content there. You'll see people like Fulham Fan News, Cottage Tactico, constantly posting and interacting with the community there. So it's a really great place to be. Please do join. You can find all the links on our Twitter. You can find it pretty much everywhere else as well. So just a reminder there. Let's have a quick think about this game, and we play Everton. Last chance to get to Goodison Park for those going along. Skibby, how are you feeling about Everton? They have been very up and down the last couple of seasons. They've lost some key players over the last couple of years. How do we feel going into this game?
I'm always optimistic just because I have a good friend who is an Everton fan, and I love to wind him up. And he's very easy to wind up. So keep that in mind if anyone comes across him at any point. But it's just, Everton are a funny one. And I will always stand by the game has evolved, and Sean Dyche is not the man to take you forward. It's a similar stance that I had to West Ham. So West Ham they won that European Cup. They were qualifying for Europe, but you could start to see certain declines, and it just was going down and down and down, and the football just wasn't good, and a lot of my mates just weren't enjoying watching West Ham, and I'm getting that with Everton as well. They're not playing good football. They're playing Ashley Young at left back. He just cries to me every week, my mate. It just says, why is Ashley Young even on the pitch? And I would be exactly the same. And I just think, for me, there's one thing about, if you were to offer me, as an Everton fan, to say, I would bring in a new manager, you will finish 17th, however, you will see a much more expansive way of football, a lot more positive, and then it will start to grow, similar to what Silver's done with Fulham. Just you start to see signs that things are starting to work, and I think you would definitely take that over a sort of a 15th place finish every year with this Sean Dyche type football, which just isn't very attractive. And I just think that's where Everton kind of are at the moment. They're kind of on that brink of, do we stick or do we twist with Dyche? Because he'll have a real stinker start to the season. I think they kept throwing away 2-0 leads, which was very funny. But it's getting to the point where he will win the next game to save the job and sort of relieve the pressure. So I think they won 2-0, wasn't it, Ipswich at the weekend, which I thought was a surprising result, because I thought Ipswich, especially when we played them, were a very good team. So it was interesting to see how Everton got that result. But again, when you see the goals, it's very kind of, I think one was Michael Keane, just an absolute ruthless finisher in front of goal. I think if you look at his stats, his goal conversion rate's up there with Haaland in terms of shots, which is ridiculous. But it's something about Everton that they just seem to click at the most unusual points, get the result, and then for me seem to just falter and not really have much of a game plan. And I think it's an interesting one for me of how or which Everton's going to turn up, because I genuinely have no idea. But I mean, I'm going to be optimistic because I've just seen Everton too much this season where, like I said, they're just very inconsistent, I think is the word.
Yeah.
Very key word for Everton. But yeah, that's what I see from them.
But if you look at those results in recent form, Newcastle, not a bad side. Ipswich away is a difficult game. And I didn't see the match. I haven't even seen the highlights. But that's probably a pretty good result to keep Ipswich goalless at home. And Palace, okay. Look, they're not a great side, but that is kind of confounding, those results, because they're not bad results. What's interesting about
Leicester and Newcastle, though? I mean, when they came, Leicester and Newcastle, especially when they came to the Cottage, were not very good teams at all. And Southampton, we've seen they're in like free fall, but they're the points that they need to be winning, especially Southampton at home.
You look at those last 5 fixtures; they're bottom half. Not even just bottom half. They're like relegation zone fixtures, barring the Newcastle one. But they're all teams who they should be getting results against anyway. So really, 2 wins, 3 draws from those games is kind of expected.
Minimum.
Minimum is probably a better way of saying it.
The point I was going to make, though, is that we absolutely, on form and sort of results so far this season, and just man for man, we should absolutely be taking 3 points away. However, it's away, and we're not great on the road. I don't even know why, but we're just not. And despite the fact that the last 2 games have been Man City, where we couldn't possibly expect to win, Man City away, and Villa doing really, really well, good quality side, and perhaps that scoreline last Saturday was not entirely reflective, but if someone had said to you a month ago you're going to lose to Villa, you wouldn't argue the toss, right? So not terrible, sort of outside of the bell curve results at all. However, we do have a few issues at the moment. We've got Lukic injured, and he's key for us in the middle. We got Anderson out on Saturday. We've got problems in the middle of the park, no question about it. And so we are somewhat vulnerable there. This is the Premier League, we're not playing a championship side.
Yeah, and look, we'll be, like you said, we'll be missing Anderson. We'll be missing Lukic. Castagna's still got a little hamstring injury by the sounds of things. Cuenca is almost certainly not going to play as well. So, seeing as we do have those players missing, let's have a quick chat about the expected lineup. There were obviously some. It seemed like quite a few issues, really, with the midfield, especially. So, Dad, I'll throw to you first. How do you see Silva changing things up? Because I think there will have to be changes. What do you see Silva going with against Everton?
Well, I wish I could read his mind. I so often can't. And he's got some pretty dogged views, Marco Silva, and he seems firmly convicted that Sander Berger is his number six, and a very capable number six that he's certain can work, just like he's absolutely certain Pereira can work in the number eight. I'm not certain either of those things are true, but I don't quite know how long it takes before he makes a change. You could make a massive argument for Harrison Reed being given a game on Saturday. I've heard lots of cries for Tom Kearney to be given a game on Saturday. Um, I'm, the problem with both of those guys, they haven't played a lot of football, and I'm not sure they've got the legs, particularly Kearney, to see 90 minutes out. And then you've got ESR, who, frankly, we've all seen it. There's a player there and a half, but he's very, very inconsistent, and it's hard to put your finger on it. I don't know that we really understand the best way to support him or the best system that he's going to play in for us.
Yeah, Skibby, your thoughts on how we line up on the weekend? Oh, you seem to have lost your mic, Skibby. Um, I'll jump in while Skibby tries to fix that. Look, I think Sander Berger, we're likely to stick with him. I just see him being the obvious replacement for Lukic, but I agree. I think Harrison Reed is probably the person that you want to bring in just to add some doggedness. I think Lukic has actually impressed me this season with his tackling. And so I could fully expect to see Harrison Reed get a start and actually Berger move almost into the 8 maybe, and we see then ESR sit in the 10, and maybe Reece Nelson actually gets a start. He's been very impressive, and I wouldn't mind seeing him get a run out against Everton, and maybe it just adds a bit more depth to the bench at that point. Skibby, are you back working again?
I think I'm back now. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we are. Perfect.
Yep. Oh,
what
perfect.
are your thoughts?
No, so I think we'll keep it the same. It's just the Marco way, and I think it's one of those where I talked about the learning curve from Aston Villa. Everton's going to be a completely different game. They're going to kind of want to counter. They're going to be a low block team. I mean, I think it's Decore and Jusagay, I think. I might have got that one wrong. But yeah, I think they sit with Dwight McNeil in sort of like the 10. So I think for me, it'll be the same. I can't see any glaring changes. I mean, like you say, it would be really nice to sort of see maybe Iwobi come central and give Reece Nelson that chance on the wing.
Yeah.
And I can see that working. Just how Iwobi started the season, that he could take that kind of momentum and that confidence level into the centre of the park would kind of go go a long way. The only one I want to squash, and it's I love people's thoughts, but I keep seeing it. Josh King is not going to start for Fulham in the central midfield in the Premier League at 16, 17. He's too lightweight. He's too young. It's just not going to happen. Stop calling for Josh King. But, I mean, I'd love to see him have a cameo when we're doing quite well. But if he starts ahead of Kearney, Harrison Reed, or, even the Iwobi switch that we mentioned, something's wrong. if he's getting in ahead of him, it's not going to happen. Stop calling.
Well, not just
for
that.
it.
It's not good for his development either. You don't want to throw a player like that into the deep end and
he's going to get smashed by Decore straight away. And
yeah. And he'll almost be playing out of position as well a little bit. Like I feel like Josh King would work better in the 10 maybe, and realistically we're not going to put him in the 10. If he plays in the 8, he'll probably manage it, but I don't think that's where we'd want to have him playing on the weekend. I agree. I'd love to see him come off the bench and get a bunch of 20-minute little cameos as the season progresses, and maybe there's a point where he does get a start against a slightly less physical midfield presence. There might be a chance for a Josh King start, but this isn't the game. It's not the time either. He's having a great season, to be fair, but I just think it's too soon, and you don't want to smash a bloke's confidence by putting them in when we're trying to fill gaps. You want him to get in off merit, off a couple of good performances, and off an opportunity arising. Not in this situation. It doesn't feel right. Skibby, where do you see Everton's weakness in this game? For me, I feel like they're actually doing okay at the moment, but they're not exceptional. How do you see Fulham breaking this one down?
I don't think. For me, it just comes down to sort of the defence and being able to unlock the Sean Dyche defence, which is going to be a low block. Like I mentioned, there's going to be 2 central midfielders sitting in. I think they're going to try and pack out the middle. They'll try and force us wide and basically get us to try and attack the centre of the box, which, it's worked somewhat with Raul Jimenez this year, but it's going to be an interesting one of those of you've got to attack us and then they'll try and catch us on the break. I think that's how it's going to work. I mean, a Marco team, especially against Everton, away to Everton, is going to want the ball. We're going to want to dictate the pace. We're going to want to take it that way. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting one because, I mean, as I mentioned, Everton have goals in them. They keep throwing away 2-0 leads apparently, but which signifies that the defence is maybe the issue. But when you look at those sort of games and those goals, it's not glaring mistakes. It's just under the cosh and they eventually break under pressure, which seems to come their way. I think we need to hurry Pickford. He's got a lot of mistakes on him, especially with the ball at his feet. I've been going to the England games, which have been awful, where he just seems to panic or not even, just seems to be too relaxed. So I think if we're able to pressure him, get some mistakes on Pickford, I think that's definitely where we can strike. Definitely set Berger on him at corners, because he won't be able to catch anything if Berger's sitting on him.
I swear Pickford always seems to have a blinder against us, though. He's made a couple of amazing saves against us in the last couple of years from point blank. Dad?
Yeah, I do fancy Nelson with a low block. I think he's the kind of guy who can unpick that sort of crowded defensive midfield and last line of defence. And I do like him combining with ESR, and I think we haven't had that. ESR on the weekend, if you didn't manage to pick that up, guys, he was actually dropping quite deep, but failing to link up play or actually progress the ball forward. I don't think he's that kind of player, but he is very good at arriving in the box, and he's skillful. And so if you've got to unpick a very dour Sean Dyche low block, then I'd fancy I'd fancy those guys to start, to be honest.
Yeah, it's hard to say, and I think the breaking down the low block is going to be key. I've really liked the way that we've actually attacked that this season. Though I think we've done fairly well breaking them down, but it's going to be an interesting decision for Marco to make because I think there are some players really knocking on the door, and Reece Nelson's probably the one for me who I think deserves a start. Every time he comes on, he looks exciting, and I think he could give a very he could just cause problems for Everton. I'd like to see. I know there's some people saying Reece Nelson and Iwobi maybe start, but I wouldn't mind seeing um, Reece Nelson and Adama both start, just purely for the pace and the trickery that those two have. I think you could really knacker the Everton defence early doors. And then late in the game, you bring on Iwobi and Wilson, who are maybe a little bit more composed. Coming up against an already tired backline could be the way forward. Raul Jimenez, I think, obviously continues to start, even though Muniz has got himself on the score sheet recently. Quite interesting that Muniz didn't get on the field at all against Villa. Um, Dad, any reason do you think behind that?
I think I think whatever was developing in Marco's mind got absolutely scrambled when Anderson got sent off. And there may well have been a plan to give him a chance to see what he could do. Um, but Jimenez was actually doing well and he was working very hard, fairly tirelessly. And yeah, I just think we, just got very, very out of shape towards the end of that game. And when that own goal went in after the red card, it was just like, fuck me.
Language alert. Never mind. Skibby.
I think that's the only expression you could have after that own goal went in. I think so. Was that the question, or?
Yeah, well, it's more. I'm interested in why Muniz didn't come off the bench because it happens almost every time we see when Muniz was starting. Jimenez had always seemed to come on late. I know Jimenez did have a very good game, but I would have thought even with 10 men trying to chase the game, you may as well bring Muniz on at some point because he does cause issues. And I feel like this is an opportunity for us to cause Everton issues late in the game, if that makes sense. I feel like it's going to be, really grind them down for the first 60, 70 minutes. And then late on in the game, we'll see a couple of players come on to maybe change the game at that point. Let's talk about the defence now. Do we see anyone apart from Diop starting?
I think Cuenca's
No.
injured, isn't he?
Yeah, it's
Oh, he
all
had a
very
knock.
confusing with Cuenca at the moment because we know that he had, apparently had a bit of a niggle. There's also suggestions that he's not settling at the moment in London, and maybe in a similar way that Sander Berger had an injury before he signed for Fulham. Who really knows what's going on behind closed doors? But do we? Who would you prefer to be starting, Diop or Cuenca?
Diop.
Yeah, I don't think you could chance Cuenca with his relative inexperience on the right, playing on his wrong side. I think that's a lot to ask.
We know how
Um,
Bassi goes on the right.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
wouldn't want it either. I think the more interesting point is like, who the hell is going to play out from the back? Who's going to have the key role? Most likely Bassi. And the real problem last week was not only not only did we have very few options to receive the ball in defensive midfield, because Berger was getting caught and he didn't look good with the ball at his feet. He was getting caught and shut down very quickly. If you then compound that to the fact that we don't have Anderson, notwithstanding the fact that Villa had a really good plan and forced us left and really shut down our ability to play out. It's going to be interesting to see how many balls go long from Leno and from the defensive line, and I'm kind of hoping that it there's a fair amount of it because I just don't have the confidence that we're going to be a very effective unit playing out from the back this week.
Yeah, I think we will be forced into playing it slightly differently without Lukic, without Anderson, who, you know, a lot of our forward movement comes from those two. In terms of if we're playing short out of the back or trying to find Anderson in a bit of space for him to be able to ping a long ball forward, I think we're going to have to change it up because it's just going to be it's going to get messy, I think, and we're going to see some errors. We know Diop and Bassi are both slightly error prone when it comes to playing out of the back. And I think if you add someone like Harrison Reed in there as well, who is been okay, but you're not really picking him to be, playing out from the back and hitting those key passes. Skibby, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the only thing that I am slightly optimistic about is that Diop has a kind of trajectory on his performance graphs. He has good games, absolute stinker, game-changing mistake. Then he has like some really good games again, and then
Yeah.
there's this, and then he drops an absolute stinker. So if that continues, we're in for an absolute masterclass from Diop on Saturday, which I'm looking forward to. But I think Diop also fits the bill for combating a Sean Dyche team. I know I keep saying hitting home about ugly football and I don't like it, but they're gonna try and hit the sort of long balls, try and use Doucouré's physicality, try and use Calvert-Lewin. He's an absolute handful if he's playing up front, and I just think that Diop just fits this game. Just sling it in, he'll head it out, and I think it's going to be really crucial to not really focus on the centre backs playing it out. But I think it's going to be really crucial of who's in that midfield to pick up the ball and then use something with it. If it's going to be, Pereira enabled to sort of look for those early sprays out to Adama Traore or Iwobi, I think that would probably be what's going to be an ask of Pereira if he does play, is sort of be that ball playing, deep lying playmaker if we have to, just to receive the ball and use it a bit better and a bit more safely than he has done previously.
Well, a good point you make there about Pereira, because he's probably, if let's assume that Berger and Pereira line up in defensive or midfield. Even last week, he was a much more reliable receiver of the ball coming out from the back. But if you remember Dave's quote, that I think he mentioned that Pereira's pass completion last Saturday was 57%.
Yeah,
That's pretty poor.
not great.
And if that's your link man, it doesn't even matter that he's received the ball because you've just turned it over, albeit a little bit further up the pitch.
Do we think Pereira's on the chopping block for this game?
Form would say, or history would tell you that Marco is going to die on that hill, and he keeps picking him because he utterly believes in him and he trusts him. I've heard people talking about the fact that, is it really? Can we really play both Pereira and Emile Smith-Rowe in the same team starting? And I'm not sure of the answer there. But I just think that Pereira, I'm sorry, he's not a bad footballer, and he hasn't got a work rate problem at all. He's a trier. But to me, it's just not working. And the reason it's not working is because we didn't actually do good enough business in those key positions, and we're asking him to plug a role that's not really him.
Skibby?
Yeah, I think when you look at it, in the sort of past few games, Pereira is being stretched, and I think it is quite unfair potentially. I mean, I know it's always become a bit of a thing here that I will always defend Pereira with my life, but no, he dropped a stinker. I'm gonna put it out there. He didn't have a good game against Villa, and the penalty was woeful. But if you look at his position on the pitch when we're attacking, he's up with Smith Rowe. You know, you've got Smith Rowe on the left of the striker, you've got Pereira on the right. Then when we lose the ball, Pereira is the one that has to track back and plug that hole. It's just a lot of a ask for, it's something which, reminds me of like a Ramirez at Chelsea or potentially even Kante at times. But if you have that work rate and the pace to be able to get in the box to box in such a fashion, then fair enough. But Pereira isn't the fastest of players. He is a flair player. He's a luxury player. But we're now asking him to sort of do, we almost want a hybrid of Harrison Reed, stamina and pace and work rate, but you want the touch and technicality of Pereira, which just doesn't exist. Whereas I think now we're trying to force the hand of, okay, well Pereira, we're just going to run you into the ground and get you fit as a fiddle and get you to go from box to box. And to be fair, he does try, but I just think it is now proving potentially too far that the tactics just don't fit the way that we want Pereira to play, and we're not using him at the best of his abilities, in my opinion.
And he's not a box to box player. Let's be honest. Like you say, he's a luxury player. He's an attacking player. He's someone you kind of expect to be sitting forward for the entirety of the game and putting his effort into the attacking side of the game. We can't really expect him to be running back on defense, and so you do get those gaps because Marco is asking a lot from him. So I agree with that, and I think for that reason, I feel like for this game maybe he probably is a little bit on the chopping block, because I think we need, without Lukic there, we do need someone who's going to track back a little bit more, and maybe we play in not a more defensive fashion, but we, rather than having that Pereira style player who pushes forward and sort of hangs around the edge of the box, you have someone like Sanderberger maybe asked to sit a little bit deeper, and then Harrison Reed sits behind him. So I think there might be changes coming, because I think that performance, it would. I know Silva does like to stick with things, but I think off the back of a stinker like that across the board, really, you do have to make some sweeping changes. And as we've sort of said, the best players were Leno and goal and Jimenez up front. Everything in between for me is sort of, up for debate, really, because I think there's a lot of players who'd be pushing for call ups and should be considered, because I think we need to change things up. I'll ask you guys for a prediction for this one. Skibby, I'll go to you first.
I'm going to say a 3-1 Fulham win.
Oh, very confident. I love that, Dad.
Did flirt with the idea of 3-1, but I think it's going to be 2-1, and I think Jimenez for a brace.
Yep. I'm going to go with 1-0. I feel this is going to have a similar feel to the Forest game, where it's going to be scrappy, because I think both teams are going to have to fight quite hard for a result here. So I'm going 1-0 Fulham. I can't see this one being an open and flowing game by any means. So I think it's going to come down to who takes their chances, and hopefully there's a mistake in Everton at some point, and we capitalise on it. Let's have a quick look at the table Fulham currently sitting in 10th spot with 11 points from the 8 games played. Everton, who we play on the weekend, have 8 points from 8 games, 2 wins, 2 draws, 4 losses. Fulham with a better goal difference so far. A win on the weekend will see us move up potentially as high as 6th, but realistically probably jump 1 or 2 spots depending on how other fixtures go. Looking at the table, Dad, I'll throw to you first. I saw actually the other 14, who's a great page to follow on Twitter, put out their baseline tracker, and Fulham actually now apparently are tracking behind the baseline, which is, to get to 38 points by the end of the season. To get to 40 points by the end of the season. Now that we're sort of 8 games in, how do you feel Fulham are actually tracking so far this year?
2 weeks ago, or just before the international break, I was very incredibly positive. Lukic's injury is a real problem for us. He was frankly the only bright light in that midfield, and that's going to hurt us. I'm not sure how long he's out for, but it's got to be another couple of weeks at a very minimum, I would have
I
thought.
think at least a couple weeks from now. We won't have him for Everton. We won't have him
Probably
for
three.
at least the game afterwards, I'd say.
Yeah. Okay, Anderson out for a week, not the end of the world. But yeah, I mean, the thing that worries me is that we actually do have a relatively easy run of games here, and in better form and with a kind of fitter squad, we should be really picking up a bunch of points. And I think now we're a little bit vulnerable. Sitting in 10th with 11 points, if we fluff our lines over the next couple of games and don't pick up, in the next 3 games, we don't pick up, let's say, 6 points, we could start slipping down that table. It's fairly compressed between, 10th and 16th. And I don't think it spells disaster in any way, because we're still miles better at full strength with the current squad. We're miles better than the last 4 or 5 teams, 6 teams on that list. So I don't think it's perilous, but I think we're in danger of actually just sliding back a little bit, and then having to regroup once we're back to full fitness.
Skibby, your thoughts on Fulham's start to the season?
Yeah, I mean, I would say cautious optimism, probably more so than Elton. I think you look at the 3 losses. We lost to Man United at Old Trafford. We lost to Man City at the Etihad, I want to say.
Yeah.
And, and then Villa at home, fair enough, I think. I think that's kind of there's no shocking results there where you think, we could have really done better there. And I mean, the ones we do think we could have done better there are, Man United at Old Trafford not losing in the last minute to a scuffed effort. But I think there is reason to be optimistic. I think this is the crucial part of the season where, unfortunately, it does define the season. If you can't beat the team, if you're, we beat Newcastle, Leicester, and then I forget the other one now. Forest. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So if we're beating the teams around us and below us, then absolutely we should be then picking up the odd point from the big 6, and that's where you start to define your season into a more successful one. But in my eyes, when we were losing Palhinha, we didn't know how to replace him. We had to replace him by completely changing our system, making other players do things that they're not used to, which is the Pereira situation. I still consider this a transitional year, and I think if we were to finish 15th, 14th, I would still consider that a success, just because, one, we've managed to stay in the division where we have lost a very crucial piece of our puzzle. And if we're able to build on that, then that's still momentum and that's still a good point for me. I think
Mm.
the way that we're going and the performances that we've seen and the yes, we're on the back of two losses, Man City and Aston Villa. I think that's still well, the Man City one especially was a really good result or a good performance. Sorry,
Performance, yeah.
not a good result, but it was a great performance. I thought we really took it to the best team in the world at their own ground, and we really held our own. And I think yes, we're on the back of two losses. Yes, the Villa one was surely a write-off, but definitely a learning curve. But the I still see positive momentum and good things coming from this team that can push us into that top half if we can continue. But like I said, this is the crucial time now where we have to really be ruthless with the teams below us and really put them to the sword.
Yeah, the one other thing I'd add to the concerns in midfield is that we're focusing on Lukic's recovery from injury, but he's also sitting on 4 yellow cards, so we're going to lose him again, and so that's going to drop at some point. It has to happen. I mean, it's just inconceivable he's going to get to Christmas without
Yeah.
getting a ban. Yeah, I think I don't disagree with any of that. I did say that I thought the games we've lost are really no shame at all, and I don't think we should be too disappointed by those losses per se and having not picked up points. I guess I'm just really concerned that we can't seem to sort out the middle of the park. And even though Polinia was a very unique kind of a player, and in many ways, how do I best say it? He was probably a difficult player to find a good combination partner for, and Lukic certainly had great trouble pairing with him last year. Couldn't find a way. But yeah, we just haven't seemed to either buy the right players to actually combine, or to find a way to make existing players work in the middle. And I am concerned about that, because if we can't have good rhythm and control in the middle of the park, these teams that we feel confident we should run over and pick up 3 easy points, it's going to be difficult.
Yeah, look, I think to echo what Skibby said, it's a pivotal little moment now, and the Everton game is the start of a period where I think our season can go either way. It's a fork in the road, if you will. We play Everton, Brentford, Palace, Wolves over the next few weeks. That's teams sitting in 16th, 18th, 20th, and 13th. We should expect a minimum of 10 points, I'd say, and realistically we should be picking up 12 points in those 4 games. If we falter here and only pick up, let's say, 6, I think it's slightly worrying signs at that point. And yes, admittedly, we will be probably missing Lukic for probably all of those games. He might manage to play one of those. Anderson will be missing for one of those. I'm sure there'll be other little niggles that pop up as well that mean players are missing. But I do think that this is a really pivotal little time, and Marco will know that. We've come off the back of games against Man City and Villa. So last 2 games are tough games. This is a little period now where we need to prove ourselves, and we need to prove the kind of team that we're going to be this season. If we do pick up 4 wins from 4 games, which is not out of the question, we'll be sitting with 12 games played and 23 points on the board, and be looking good at that point, I'd say. If we falter here, it's a different story, and I think I'd be worried at that point. Not overly worried of a relegation scrap or anything like that, but I'd feel like it's going to be more of a transitional year where we just sort of get to 40 as in any way possible, and then build from there next season. But it feels like there's an opportunity this season to really kick on, and if we fail over the next 4 games, that opportunity might slip away. Because I think if we do have this good little start here and we get results across those next four, a push for Europe is definitely not out of the question because we've played some tough teams already. And we can get to Christmas and be in a really good position to kick on. It's an opportunity that we just need to grasp now. Dad?
One really important point not to gloss over or overlook is that Raul Jimenez is having a blinder.
Yeah.
His form is incredible at the moment. He's incredibly confident as well. And that oozed on Saturday. He was hunting, he was chasing down things, and he was super up for it. And maybe we just got to be a little bit more direct, get the ball to him. He's in goal scoring mood at the moment. And, even I don't worry about our defence so much. I worry about the screening of our defence and how we get the ball in a pretty way as we like to play up the park. Maybe we just got to change things up and get the ball up to Raul and give him a chance to score because he's in great form, and that's a huge positive.
Yeah. Look, I feel confident going into this game. I know that it's been pretty dire across Twitter. It's been such a positive start to the season, and all of a sudden everything's gone back to very Fulham, Fulhamish, if you will.
Did you expect anything less?
No, of course not. As expected, we lose a couple of games to two of the best teams in the league at the moment, and all of a sudden the sky's falling. Let's be realistic about our position in the league and the opposition we played against. We're not expecting to take points away from those games, and the fact that we pushed City close, and yes, we collapsed against Villa, but it's not the end of the world by any means. I think it's just about how we bounce back now, and I'm quietly confident that we can bounce back from this. And I'm sure Silva has been drilling it into the guys during the week that this is an important time now, and it's a time to take the bull by the horns, if you will. Look, I'm looking forward to this game on the weekend. It's hopefully going to be a chance for Fulham to bounce back to the way we were before that international break and get back into the zone. But I'm wary that we are missing Lukic and Anderson, who are two of our better players this season and two key players to the way that Fulham play. So it's going to be interesting to see how Silva counteracts that. Guys, I think we can probably wrap it up there. It's going to be a good game this weekend. But yeah, looking forward to this one. Skibby, thank you for joining today. Back to putting together flat pack furniture for you.
Yeah, well, back to work first and then then flat pack. But no, it's good to finally be back behind a mic and talk about Fulham and basically not think about what screw or can you collect A to B or C or where's all the other ones, twos and threes. So no, it's been good, and looking forward to the game, and hopefully we can pick up from where we were a couple of weeks, before the international break, but we'll see.
Get all those Allen keys sorted out while you can.
If anyone wants an Allen key,
Cheers, Skibby, and thanks, Dad, for joining tonight.
Thank you. Make sure you get enough sleep on Friday night, Jack, so you can stay awake for Saturday night.
Yeah, look, there's another story there that might get told in the Discord, I think. But anyway, guys, thank you again to everyone who's joined along on the live stream. We really appreciate you joining in. Thank you to everyone who continues to listen, and please do share with your friends, subscribe, like the posts, like the podcast, and we really appreciate all the support. And as always, come on, you Whites.